Before we get started, we have some administrative items to go through. That'll take a little bit of time before we get to the main agenda items. But before we do the roll call, we ask that everyone identify themselves first when speaking so we can more accurately record the activities of the meeting. All lines have been muted by the administrator to minimize additional noise and feedback. You may mute your line at any time or unmute your line at any time to request acknowledgement from the chair. Staff will be monitoring the chat that's located at the bottom of the screen throughout the meeting to assure we do not overlook anyone wishing to participate in the discussion. So again, if you have any questions during the presentations or during the discussion, please put your questions in the chat. I will now ask our clerk to certify that we have followed the approved procedures for appropriate notice of this meeting and the means by which we are convening.
Yes, this is Nicole Mueller, and I can certify that we have followed the approved.
Please indicate your presence by saying aye when your name is called during a roll call. Anyone who wishes to identify themselves following the roll call of members will be invited to do so. So Nicole, I guess I'll turn it over to you to do the roll call.
Thank you. And I can certify that we have followed the approved procedures, and I'm going to go ahead and take attendance. Please unmute yourself, your name, so that we know you're here this morning. Chesterfield County, Mrs. Smith. Is Mrs. Smith here this morning? Miss Benedict.
I'm here.
City of Richmond, Mrs. Clark. Mr. Bridewell. Miss Erickson. Mr. Steele. Goochland County, Mr. Coleman. Mr. Kilduff. Hanover County, Mr. Vidunas. Okay, I think I can see Mr. Vidunas. Are you able to unmute yourself? Okay, moving on. Hanover County, Mr. Flagg. Henrico County, Mrs. Meidler.
Aye.
Mrs. Deemer. New Kent County, Ms. Leduc.
Here.
Powhatan County, Mr. Pompey.
Aye.
Mr. Howland. Town of Ashland, Miss Amos.
Here.
Mr. Tucker. Capital Region Airport Commission, Mr. Rutledge. GRTC Transit System, Ms. Torres. Ms. Del Ross.
Here.
RMTA, Mrs. Simmons. Plan RVA, Mr. Parsons.
Here.
Mr. Ariel.
Here.
Right Finders, Ms. Tisdale. Mr. O'Keefe. DRPT, Ms. Dubinsky.
Here.
Mr. Sparks. From VDOT, Ms. McAdory. Mr. Herman.
Here.
VCU, Mr. Leonard.
Present.
NAACP, Mr. Johnson. Richmond Area Bicycling Association, Mr. Burnley. Virginia Asian Chamber of Commerce, Ms. Tran. Senior Connections, Mr. Williams. RVA Rapid Transit, Mr. Campbell. Bike Walk RVA, Ms. Lockett.
Present.
Port of Virginia, Ms. Nelson.
Here.
Mr. Reinhardt.
Here.
Southern Environmental Law Center, Mr. Pollard.
Here.
Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities, Mr. Reveille. Virginians for High Speed Rail, Mr. Plar. Federal Highway Administration, Mr. Duran.
Here.
And Tri-Cities MPO, Mr. Swikowski.
Here. Wow, you pronounced my name pretty good.
Thank you. Thank you. That concludes the roll call.
Thank you. Well, Chet and I have a few other administrative items to go through. First of all, is the statement regarding our virtual meetings. Of course, this is an electronic meeting. Since the governor declared the state of emergency on March 12, 2020, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, state and local governmental bodies have been providing for the continuity of government by meeting remotely by telephonic or electronic means in compliance with the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, the Commonwealth's emergency, and other applicable laws, guidance provided by the Attorney General and their respective legal counsel. On April 22nd, the General Assembly approved a budget amendment to authorize all public bodies, including regional bodies such as ConnectRVA and the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization, likewise to meet by electronic means without a physical quorum assembled together during a governor-declared state of emergency, as long as certain conditions are met, so as to provide for the continuity of governmental operations. This new authority was effective immediately. The virus makes it impractical and unsafe for the public and agency staff to gather in the same location to participate in this meeting. The health, safety, and welfare of our community is of paramount importance. Therefore, we have determined the appropriateness and eligibility to conduct today's meeting of the RRTPO electronically pursuant to the provisions of Virginia Code Section 2.2-3708.2 and related legislation approved by the General Assembly of Virginia, and in light of the governor's state of emergency declaration for COVID-19. The convening of the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization, RRTPO, and associated committees has been determined necessary in order to continue the necessary business of the organization. The matters included on the agenda address important or essential matters of continuing the work of government, and therefore it is appropriate to convene during this time. While we do not know the exact duration of the current practice of electronic meetings, we will continue to function in this manner until such time as is deemed advisable to return to in-person meetings. At this time, we expect meetings to occur in electronic format through the current declaration on June 10th, 2020. Our TPO staff have provided notice of this meeting and the means by which we are virtually gathered to members of the public. Notice was provided on May 22nd, 2020 through posting on the ConnectRVA website and distribution of email notification to members, alternates, and known interested parties, including the media. In order to comply with the provisions of Virginia law and to improve accessibility to the discussions intended for today, this meeting will be recorded. Audio and visual recordings of the meeting will be posted on the ConnectRVA website within 48 hours of the meeting. Any members of the public wishing to address this committee were invited to submit comments via email until the close of business one day prior to the meeting in order to be reviewed and addressed during the meeting if necessary. Anyone participating as an observer during today's meeting may submit comments or questions at any time during the meeting via email at rrtpoinput@plannrva.org or by using the online chat functions of the meeting platform. Those individuals who are observing by phone may be called upon to address the committee with their questions or comments. All comments and questions submitted during the meeting will be reviewed following the meeting, and to the extent practical, responses may be provided or posted on the ConnectRVA website. Do any committee members or members of the public have any questions regarding the process for assuring effective facilitation of this meeting or how members of the public may participate? With that, I'll turn it over to Chet that will go into more detail on the procedures for electronic meetings.
Thank you very much. I did want to note before I started reading this that Our other TPO committees, we have read this procedures statement out loud, but so it will be repetitive for some of you, but we wanted to make sure that anybody that's on this committee understands the procedures that we're following as we move through this process, and obviously any members of the public that are tuning in as well. I did want to go through a couple of housekeeping items before I started through the procedures. If you are unable to unmute yourself, please use the chat to make yourself known. I believe Mr. Williams is here and Mr. Vadunas as well. They were not able to verbally acknowledge themselves, but we wanted to make that note. I also wanted to say that as we move into business items, when there are presentations later in the meeting, if you have questions, use the chat to send those in during the presentation, and staff will make sure that we address them and then can address each of you appropriately so that those questions can be addressed. I don't know if I've said addressed enough times. So I'm going to go ahead and start through the procedures for electronic meetings, and it is on the screen if you're able to log in digitally. The notice of meetings of public bodies supported by ConnectRVA will be given in accordance with the applicable law and the body's bylaws. In general, notice will be provided at least 10 days prior to the scheduled meeting and include the proposed agenda and meeting materials, as well as confirmation of the date and time and instructions to access the meeting. This notice will be posted on the ConnectRVA website, links to which will be distributed to all members, alternates, interested parties, and our media contact list, assuring that members of the body and the public are notified concurrently. Contents of this notice will include the date and time of the meeting, the electronic means by which the meeting will be held, and instructions for joining the meeting as a participant or observer, the method by which the meeting agenda and materials can be accessed, and the public participation process for meetings, including the methods by which comments may be provided by members of the public before, during, and after the meeting. Members of the public are invited to participate in public meetings of ConnectRVA, the RRTPO, and their respective committees. The following are new ways members of the public can participate in and follow the business of ConnectRVA and the RRTPO during this time. Anyone wishing to participate as an observer in a public meeting may do so. They should register with ConnectRVA staff to get access to the meeting instructions and may sign on online or dial in by phone. Anyone wishing to submit comments prior to the meeting may do so by email. Comments received by 5 p.m. the business day preceding the meeting will be provided to members of the public body and included in the administrative record. Members of the public may use the chat feature in the online platform to submit questions or comments during the meeting. These will be recorded and included in the administrative record. Finally, agendas will be modified to offer 2 opportunities for members to address the bodies during the meeting. At the beginning, to address members regarding agenda items, and at the end, to raise any other issues not included in the day's meeting agenda, as is customary. In order to clearly communicate the electronic means by which the meeting will occur, the agenda itself will include the following information, in addition to the regular order of business and discussion and action items. A notification of the electronic means for hosting the meeting, including access information. A public announcement made by the presiding officer, administrator, or clerk secretary at the beginning of the meeting. Certification that the procedures were followed to adequately notify the public. A roll call of those participating as a member of the body in the call, and an invitation to others to identify themselves. A statement concerning public comments submitted via email or via online meeting platforms will be shared with members of the public body and included in the agency's administrative record. Opening the floor for any member of the public to address the body regarding any matter included on the agenda for the meeting. All planned agenda items, and opening the floor for any member of the public to address the body regarding any matter germane to the body, but not specifically included in the agenda. At the appropriate time, the chair will call upon members of the body to introduce a motion addressing the action item. Following a motion and a second, discussion may ensue, ultimately resulting in a call for a vote. Each vote taken during an electronic meeting must be a roll call vote, with each member's name and vote recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Minutes of each meeting shall conform to the normal standards of minutes recorded for the body. Additional documentation should include the fact that the meeting was held as an electronic meeting pursuant to the authority and reference to specific disaster declaration, the type of electronic means by which the meeting was held, and each member of the public body who participated in the meeting. Other participants in the meeting as observers may identify themselves, and if so, will be included in the record. In addition to written record of the meeting, audio-video recording will be posted within 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion on the ConnectRVA website, along with the written records once approved. The body may approve the minutes of an electronic meeting at a subsequent electronic meeting or one that is held in person. Procedures shall only take effect in the event of a state of emergency declaration pursuant to Virginia Code, whereby electronic means of hosting meetings of the public body is the only practicable way to continue the conduct of the organization and achieve other objectives to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the community and the body's members and staff. And Mr. Chairman, I did want to note that for this committee, we will not be required to do a roll call vote. We have operated by consensus as we've started meeting and will continue to do so. So when there is an action item requested, we can have a formal discussion through the electronic means as well as the chat window, so that any discussion that is necessary can take place.
All right, well, thank you. With that, we'll move on to the approval of the January 23rd, 2020 meeting summary. That meeting summary from our last meeting was included within the agenda packet. Does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns regarding that meeting summary? Seeing there are no comments in the chat box or not hearing anyone, it sounds like there is consensus that the meeting summary is accurate. So we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 2, the public comment period. Are there any members of the public that are not part of this committee that would like to address us? Not hearing anyone or seeing any comments in the chat. We'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is the LRTP process update. I think Sulab, you're here to tell us where we've come so far and what steps are coming up.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me share my screen so that you'll be able to see the presentation. Okay, I guess everybody can see the screen now. So the agenda item number 3, the LRTP process update. I'm going to give you a brief update on task 1, which is the long range growth forecast analysis report, and then task 1.1, which is the RTC model development. So this is the LRTP process flow, which you have seen multiple times, and I guess we'll see this a lot of times in this meeting as well. So first step of the process is the transportation needs assessments, in which we stand now. The second phase or the step is strategic direction, in which we develop goals, vision, objectives, and performance measures. The third step is the planning step, in which we take the issues and needs as established in phase 1 and try to convert those into projects, and then we land up with the universe of projects, which will go into step 4 or phase 4 in programming, in which we'll develop a project prioritization tool and also get the available funding for the coming years. Finally, once we have the constraint list of projects, we'll evaluate how the plan went, as this would be the first performance-based plan in the region. We'll be evaluating public outreach, environmental justice. Yep. Is everybody able to hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, can hear you fine.
Okay,
I can hear
I
you.
just, yeah, I can't, I just heard somebody, maybe there was some kind of disturbance, but yeah. And then the fifth step, as I was mentioning, is the evaluation step, in which we evaluate the plan, basically evaluating the public outreach, the environmental justice, as well as the accessibility analysis, as well as how did we do in this plan. Finally, the sixth stage is the adoption of the plan. And we all do have a parallel scenario planning process, which would be a kind of academic exercise we intend to do this time. So the 2045 Long Range Growth Forecast Analysis Report, it was previously called the Socioeconomic Data Analysis Report, and is based on the 2017 and 2045 socioeconomic data, which was established by a socioeconomic data workgroup committee, which took 18 months and has been approved by the RRTPO Policy Board in 2019. This document examines historic trends as well as anticipated future growth for socioeconomic indicators, including population, households, and employment. We have delineated regional activity centers based on TAZ level data. Activity centers is a conceptual urban planning term that depicts area of concentration of population and employment density. And finally, environmental justice data sets based on the ACS for the base year 2017 has also been developed. This data would be used in task 5.1, environmental justice analysis, as well as task 5.2, accessibility analysis. So this document previously was a standalone document, but now it's under the umbrella of LRTP, ConnectRVA 2045, and we have published the draft of the document for your review. It's in the project website. I think I provided a link in the agenda as well. So if you have any comments, you can provide that comments to us, and we'll incorporate the changes. We are not asking for approval now, because this would be approved at the end of the plan when we approve the whole plan. The other thing is the RTC model development. We started to develop the updated version of Richmond Tri-Cities model, which covers Richmond region as well as the Tri-Cities MPO part in Greater PDC, to a base year of 2017 and a future year of 2045. This process took a lot of time, 1.5 years, and has finally been completed to be used in this plan. So overall, it's a very important tool for ConnectRVA 2045. We already use this to identify future capacity needs for the region, regional highway and transit network, which is task 1.2. It will also be used to measure system performance measures, task 3, project prioritization and scoring, task 4, accessibility analysis, task 5.2, and then impact of different land use changes and different investment priorities in scenario planning parallel process, which is task 4. So that's all I have for the agenda item number 3. Are there any questions for these two items? The work for these two tasks have been completed now.
So Sue, I think there was one question in the chat about where the travel demand model is available. Is that online, or how can members look at that?
So the travel demand model is a technical tool. It requires a software, which is Cube in our case, and it's an expensive license which we can get from VDOT. So unless we have that license for that software, we can't run the model. And it's pretty much complicated, but model, if needed, model can be requested through us as well as from VDOT.
Mr. Chairman, this is Chad. I think that the other approach here is that if people have specific questions or would like to learn more about the model, they can easily contact anybody on staff, and we can have a one-on-one conversation.
Are there any other questions for Sulabh on those agenda item 3? All right, let's move on to agenda item number 4, the transportation needs inventory. And this is something that you would like us to approve today, right, Sulabh?
Yes. So the next item in the agenda item number 4, the LRTP process update, transportation needs assessment, task 1.2. Again, the same process flow map. We are in the first step, which is the transportation needs assessment. So the aim of this task was to identify regional and local multimodal transportation issues based on congestion, safety issues, lack of interconnectivity, operational problems, maintenance issues, inadequate roadway transit capacity issues, transit expansion, accessibility, and other issues, including travel demand management, transportation system resiliency, and economic development. And based on all these issues, we established an LRTP specific regional transportation needs. So the transportation issues identification was done through staff, review of regional and local plans and studies, including all the major transportation projects in the region, like the I-95 corridor study, some of the dated projects like 288-360 overlaps, 288-360 study, I-95 overlap study, as well as a lot of STAR studies going around the region. For transit, we looked at the Transit Vision Plan Phase 1, the current Transit Vision 1 Phase 2, which is ongoing. We also looked at the locality comp plan, spatial area plan, transportation plan, and whatever we could get from those, we listed down in the inventory spreadsheet. We also did Richmond Tri-Cities travel demand model runs using the existing and committed transportation network, which is the current SIP year, which goes to 2025, and the land use data, which is basically the population and employment for 2045. And we ran the model, and based on the model output of the transportation network, in which we see the capacity has reached, the volume has reached the capacity, we mark those areas or those segments as capacity constrained, and those were also listed in the issue identification inventory. LRTP advisory committee members also added some of the issues which we had missed based on the local knowledge and local plans. And finally, we had a public input in which public provided us what they think were the issues they were facing in the Richmond region. So on April 1st, the inventory list was sent to LRTP Advisory Committee. We had divided the list into 3 different tabs. The first tab was LRTP specific issues, in which we thought the issues could be deemed as a LRTP specific need. The issue had a resolution through a transportation project, and the issue can be added in the universe of transportation project to be ranked and prioritized in the LRTP constraint plan. Then there were like 127 issues which came out from VTrans. VTrans usually describe their needs based on the segments they identify in their 4 needs category, which is the corridors of statewide significance, regional networks, safety networks, and UDAs. So these were identified as well. And then there were other issues, basically issues like the program and policy issues, which needed some kind of intervention from local, regional, state, or federal level in funding. These issues would be described in the LRTP, but not necessarily be a part in the constrained list of projects. And then there were other issues like transportation studies and local and programmatic issues, which are not deemed LRTP specific. Then we also opened the public input period, which started from February, and ended in April 15th. We got 135 issues based on public input. A number of issues came through the wiki maps, the interactive map, which was placed in our project website, where people could go and select an issue on the map, either as a point or a line. We also got real estate agents transportation survey from one of our CTAC members. These had very important information, and these have been included in our issues. And then finally, we had a couple of community meetings before the current pandemic, and based on those community meetings, we also got some feedback and public input, which we included in our list. So once we got all the list, we started the formal public review period, in which we had a total of 1,089 issues. The 15-day public review period started from May 5th and ended in May 20th. We received 11 comments on the websites, pretty vocal comments. Comments have been addressed if directly related to the issue inventory spreadsheet, and it has been marked in the issue inventory spreadsheet. Other comments, which we think does not relate to issues, but other things like goals or visions or journal scope, will be addressed during the course of the plan. So just wanted to provide a disclaimer that the issues are not transportation projects. Issue might have multiple transportation projects to solve the issue. The transportation project might be in a different location from where the issue is. Some of the capacity related issues and underlying needs were based on DEXUP engineering analysis based on the RTC model. So the factors like availability of right-of-way, relocating of utilities, or the political will of the localities to move forward with the projects have not been considered in this phase. So it's just a pure engineering analysis which we have listed. The other factors would be considered when we convert the issues into logical transportation projects in task 3. In that phase, we'll consider all these constraints. So let me also show you the spreadsheet as it stands now. So we still have the tab LRTP specific, which has issues, 531 issues, then VTrans, and then other, as it was sent to the LRTP committee on April 1st. And then after April 1st, we received some comments, and based on those, we have added new additions. And then the final tab is the public comments we received. And if you look to the source 2, we have specified how did we get those comments. So some of the comments were based on bike-ped steering committee. The bike-ped plan update is also parallelly progressing. Real estate survey, and some of the meetings like the Virginia Conservation Network outreach meetings, and then general public comments. So altogether, we have 1,089 issues as it stands now. So what we are requesting the LRTP Advisory Committee is to approve the local and regional transportation needs inventory as presented by RRTPO staff. I'll be happy to answer any questions now.
Hey, Suleb, this is Ron.
Mm-hmm.
Got a couple questions. Looking back at the major milestones handout you gave early on in our process, and probably I'm maybe a little bit behind on all this now since I wasn't in the previous meeting. According to the schedule, you're going to have this completed in March. Is it still going to be done in time, or is it going to be kind of some parts of it scrunched for the rest of the process, or am I just looking at this wrong? Or is this going to be an updated sheet you're going to give us all as an updated schedule?
So yeah, I haven't worked on the updated schedule, but when we initially drafted that milestone, it was very conservative. We had done the schedule was very aggressive, but I don't think so. Based on the what we stand now, I think we can still achieve the targets needed for the plan to be completed in the September of 2021.
Great. One more question, and this maybe we could talk offline more about this, is just back and forth with the central office folks on the conformity part. We'll need to figure out when you all need to do your part, and we can see if we can maybe help you with our part, maybe jumping in with it or maybe having to do it later.
Yeah, I guess Jim told me that once we have the constraint list of project approved by our policy board, at that time, when we go out for the public comment period for the whole plan, I think the conformity can be the public comment period needed for conformity can be done at the same time. We probably need to have an interagency meeting before that.
Okay. Thanks.
Are there any other questions or comments? And I know, Sulab, you had sent out this list in an email yesterday morning. If someone thinks of a last minute need or something in their community, can they send that to you this week, or is there opportunity for something for people to provide you more feedback if they have any minor adjustments?
Yeah, I think that can be done, but ideally we have given ample amount of time for this. Provide any new issues which we haven't mentioned in the list. The other thing is that the list is not for projects, so if it's a project, it can be included in the coming task, which is task 3, planning. But if there is a concern that we need to include, we definitely can do that.
This is Sharon with Henrico. I had a question. I know the attachment you had sent out yesterday had about, I think, 500 something issues, and I know you just mentioned 1,089. Would you explain what, or am I looking at something incorrectly? I saw the Excel spreadsheet that was sent out yesterday had maybe 531 issues.
So can you see the screen now?
Yes.
So the LRTP specific is 531, but we still have VTrans and others, and new issues as well. So the serial number for the issues continues through those tabs. So
I understand now. Thank you.
No problem.
Are there any other questions? So since there aren't any major concerns or questions, I guess, Chet, we don't need to do an official roll call or anything. We can just, you said, approve this by consensus, and staff can move forward. And if anyone has any minor comments, they can send that to you all this week. Does that work?
Yes, I think so. I mean, it would be worthwhile to just ask the body now if anyone cannot support this moving forward.
So is there anyone that has any major concerns that cannot support staff moving forward with this project? All right, hearing none, it sounds like the committee is comfortable with what was presented and sent out yesterday. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, the visions, goals, and objectives introduction.
Sure, thank you so much. So the next item agenda is the item agenda number 5, LRTP process update task 2, vision, goals, and objectives. this is just an introduction meeting to get going through with these development of these. I think we'll have a couple of meetings to discuss and finalize the vision, goals, and objectives. So again, the same process flow diagram. Once we establish the transportation needs, then we develop the strategic direction in which we describe a vision for the reason, we develop the goals, and then we develop objectives for each goals, and then the objectives are measured through performance measures. So basically the work scope for this task or this phase is to develop vision goals for the LRTP. At the same time, develop objectives within each goal and performance measures which could measure the objective. There is a link with the performance measures which we develop in this phase, which would feed into project prioritization task, which is task 4. So the basic framework for goals and vision would be the introduction and discussion in the LRTP AC meeting, which is today. To get some public outreach before and after that, and then development of vision, goals, and objective by staff. Basic framework for performance measures developed by staff to feed in task 4. And then we'll introduce the this concept of vision, goals, and objectives to the policy board, and might have a couple of meetings on while discussing that in policy board. Once the policy board feels comfortable with this, we'll come back to the LRTP AC for approval, and then we'll go for the formal public review period, and then finally we'll ask for the approval from the policy board. So vision, the vision statement will describe Richmond Region's transportation aspirations in a concise manner, focus on what really is important, and provide a foundation for all aspects of the plan. So we haven't had a vision statement in our long-range transportation plan for the last 3 plans, but the one which we had last time was in the 2031 LRTP. And it stated in that plan that by 2031, the Richmond region will have strengthened its economic vitality by planning and funding a transportation system that is regional in nature, encourage the cooperation of localities, coordinates land use with transportation, protects the environment and conserves energy, promotes safe and efficient access and alternative modes, and is socially equitable and sustainable. I guess these statement is still valid as of now. There are 2 ways to define vision. Once you do it early, we define the vision first, and based on that vision, you develop goals and vision. I think this plan did the opposite. I think they developed the goals first, and based on the goals, they combine the goals to form a vision statement. So it's up to the LRTP advisory committee which approach to take. I think we can have a look on both. So while we were asking the public for the feedback on the issues, we also asked the public to provide us a shared vision for the transportation in the Richmond region in about 1 or 2 words or phrases, and tell what would be the ideal transportation system for the year 2045. And these are the hits we got. The bolder the word is, the more hits we got. So equitable, multimodal, frequent, efficient, green, connected, bike, sustainable, connectivity, those are the buzzwords which we got. And this could be the starting point to develop our vision. Goals will describe a series of desired end states for the region's transportation system informed by the vision, and will provide foundation for objectives and measures. So we have to address the federal planning factors, which was first introduced in MAP 21, and 2 more factors were included in FAST Act. So we have a total of 10 federal planning factors which we need to address. And I'm not going to read out those, but just listed there. At the same time, we also have to address MAP 21 goals. We have 7 MAP 21 goals: safety, infrastructure condition, congestion reduction, system reliability, freight movement and economic vitality, environmental sustainability, reduced project delivery delays. We also need to consider state goals, VTrans goals, as state smart scale is one of the key funding for projects in the Richmond region as well as for the whole state. So VTrans, they updated their goals and have 5 goals which we can consider as well. And then finally, we had developed 9 goals in the last round of our long-range transportation plan, which we called Plan 2040, and we can start from there as well. So this meeting is just to give you the information on all these things which we have. Seems like we don't have much room in goals, as we have to address the federal planning factors, need to align with the state goals as well as MAP 21 goals. The thing which I was thinking was that we had 9 goals the last time. I think it would, all of these goals are still valid. It might be ideal to combine 1 or 2 of those goals and make a smaller list than 9 goals, maybe 6 goals, and we combine all those. That was my basic idea. So the next step is we need LRTP AC advisory committee input, and we have created a goal setting spreadsheet in which we have listed all the factors, the federal planning factors, MAP 21 goals, smart scale goals, and the previous goals. And I will send that spreadsheet after the meeting so that if LRTP advisory committee have any comments or any thoughts about the goal process, they can be written in that spreadsheet, and that might be helpful. And then at the same time, staff will be working internally to develop recommendation for the goals as well. Objectives. It describes specific measurable statements that support achievement of the goals. Federal Highway says that the objectives needs to be SMART, which means it has to be specific, measurable, agreed upon, realistic, and time-bound. So, for example, if we have a goal to improve travel options in the region for bicycling and walking, the objective for that could be something like this: by 2045, achieve 10% of walk trips made by bicycling and walking. So it has to be specific and measurable and agreed upon, as well as time bound. So the objectives will be developed once we finalize the goal, but at the same time we know that we'll have certain goals to address, so we'll be starting developing the objectives. The staff will develop that, and we need obviously the LRTP advisory committee's blessing on that to move forward. And then finally, the performance measures. They provide the technical mechanism to monitor progress towards objective goals and vision. FHW recommends that we align this with the federal performance measures, and we have 14 performance measures which is being addressed by the state and the MPOs. We have a quarterly MPO coordination meeting in which we discuss that. So these could be some of the performance measures. It's not just limited to these, but it's good to address these because these are federal performance measures. So I think that's all I have for the task 2 goals, objectives, and vision, and performance measures. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have.
Yeah, Andrew, this is Chet. I just wanted to add on a little bit. I think that as everyone can see, there's lots of required elements for, especially for our goals. but I think we're best suited to do a visioning exercise in person. So we'd like to hold off on doing anything at this point. This is more for your information to see, so that you can see all of the different factors that are impacting the vision and goal setting process. I think for our next meeting, we can focus on hopefully an in-person exercise. If not, then we can use something like Zoom that has the capability of doing breakout rooms where we can do a little bit more individual conversation and writing to come up with a vision statement that meets the needs of the region right now. I think that's the vision statement is really our first step, so that we can define our overarching qualities that we want the region to represent in 2045. And then we use that vision to help self-select some of the goals and make sure that we meet the required elements from Federal Highways and our other partners. So staff will come up with some recommendations on the best process to use once we know more about what the physical distancing requirements are and our ability to meet in person, if that's okay.
So we'll just, between now and the next meeting, committee members can just kind of think about what Sula presented now and what they might want to bring up in a future discussion on visions, goals, and that kind of thing. I don't know if this would be helpful to other committee members or what staff's thoughts are on this, but once we have that future discussion, would it be possible to see what other regions have done in terms of vision statements and their regional plans? Obviously, we have our own unique needs and concerns, but I think it could be helpful for me, at least, to kind of see what other regions are doing and what good ideas we can pull from them, and what we like, we don't like, and that kind of thing, and for our region.
Yeah, we can definitely do a research on that and provide some vision statement examples for the LRTP Advisory Committee.
Okay, great. Are there any other comments or questions from committee members?
This is Louise. So I guess I have a question about where and how the public outreach portion of this fits within the timeline. Can you elaborate on that?
So we have, for all the different 5 phases of the plan, we have a public outreach period for all different phases at different times. So we just finished the public outreach for the issues. Once we start with the goals, we can publish that, receive comments from the public as well. So so they can provide the comments, and then we can address the comments if it's viable before we present that to the LRTP Advisory Committee and the Policy Board. And once we develop the whole set of goals, visions, and objectives, that would again go for a formal public review periods for 15 days. And then public would be able to comment on those as well at that time.
I guess my concern is, so it sounds like this group will be workshopping vision and goals, and then whatever is come up with from that process is then presented to the public for feedback. And I think perhaps it's more inclusive to do that process up front to get public feedback on what their vision is for the region as a whole in terms of transportation, and what their thoughts about goals can be, and we can use that while we workshop this as a group. I feel like oftentimes when folks are presented with something that's already been drafted, public can feel like that they didn't have really opportunity from the beginning. They're only getting opportunity at the back end. So it's just a thought about our process with engagement, is if we can move it up. I understand it's a little difficult with us, not being able to be in person and things, but just something to consider.
Yeah, we have already done that for the vision, as I showed you earlier. We asked them.
Right, for the goals, we
Yeah,
haven't done that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, for the goals, it's the goals has to address the federal requirements, as well as needs to be aligned with the state goals. So it cannot be very vague. It has to be transportation related and address those issues. So we can't just completely start from the public. I think it would be good to provide them some guidance in which they could comment on.
Well, I think they can, but then it's on us to then workshop the input that we receive and understanding, how they specifically need to address certain things as well.
Yeah, I mean, Louise, this is Chad. I absolutely hear you, and that was our intent back in the fall when we started this process. We were going to do lots of in-person meetings and talk to the public and get this kind of feedback at the same time as we were learning about issues. Obviously, that wasn't able to happen. So, I'd love to get some ideas from this group about the best ways to connect with folks to get that kind of input now on what the goals should be. And yeah, you're right. We need to relate the priorities that we hear from the public back to the federal requirements and kind of workshop that together as a committee. But yeah, we absolutely would love to get more feedback. I'm concerned about the breadth at which we can connect with folks virtually, and we'll do what we can. And clearly, a lot of you are doing great things right now from your living rooms. So I think that's something we want to build upon. So maybe that's a separate conversation after this meeting to talk about the best ways to connect with people and start that conversation now.
Sure.
Yeah, this is Ben. I think, and thanks, Louise, for going after that. I think that it is not clear to me, and I think it can be made much clearer how people can, and including this committee, can evaluate present statements of goal and vision, and also make suggestions and questions about that. I don't even think that process is well outlined yet. And how extensive we can make that process or get input, I think that you obviously have stated that issue well, but the process is not clear, and the goals are the critical piece of the whole deal. And I also recognize that you have a number of required goals and statements that have to be made by all the various regulatory situations that you're within. So we're talking about how we tune this to acknowledge the specific issues and opportunities that this region has that make us a special place, and also require special kind of remediation and work that has not yet been done in Richmond.
All right, are there any other questions or comments regarding this process? So Sulab, again, this was an introduction to the process, and do you have all the information you need from us right now?
Yeah, this is just the introduction. I'll be sending the advisory committee a spreadsheet in which I would have outlined all the requirements, the federal requirements, MAP 21 goals, VTrans goal, and our previous goals. So the advisory committee can play with that spreadsheet, weigh in their how they think the goals should be, as we can customize that to our region. So that would be something which LRTP Advisory Committee can work on from now to the next meeting. And at the same time, staff will also work on recommendation, develop our own goals, and then ask for the recommendation in the next meeting.
Okay. If there aren't any other questions, or does someone have a comment? If there aren't any other questions or comments, I think staff has direction. I think the committee has direction on the vision and goals. I think there's some additional clarification on public involvement that some committee members were looking for, but if staff can work on that, we'll move on to agenda item number 6, which is task number 3 in the planning process.
Yeah, thank you. Now we'll be discussing agenda item number 6, LRTP process update, task 3, planning. So again, the same process flow map. We are now in, this is the 3rd phase after the transportation needs assessment and strategic direction. I think we can work parallelly on both task 2 and task 3 simultaneously. So this graph shows the process flow from issue identification to project prioritization. So we have identified the issues, and now we develop the universe of projects which would be ranked and scored in the project prioritization process, which is task 4. So the basic framework, transportation issues needs as identified in task 1.24 to be converted into logical project. This would be done primarily by staff with the help of LRTP advisory committee members and technical assistance from VDOT and DRPT staff as well. Project in LRTP would require at the minimum the location details of the project, anticipated project cost, which would include capital cost, maintenance and operational cost, and then time frame for which it's phased for completion. Complex projects like the interchange would require a conceptual sketch so that when we code those projects in the Richmond Tri-Cities model, we have some concept of those. So we also want to add a project champion or the applicant for each project. Normally, in the previous round of LRTP, the projects would come from applicants. But this time we are developing the projects based on the issues and needs as identified in task 1.2. But still we want a project champion for each project. And then project inclusion guidelines, which I'll be discussing later on. And then finally, projects type should be categorized by funding allocation type. So projects would be categorized like bicycle and pedestrian project, bridge projects, highway, intersection, intermodal, public transit, rail, state of good repair, and then others. And then the final product would be the list of universe of projects, which would go in task 4 for ranking and prioritization. So project champions, we have listed all these entities as project champions, but there needs to be some discussion on this. So we have RRTPO, highway and transit projects, which we can decide on which one would be the one which RRTPO will be heading. Then we have the localities as well. All the localities project, those if the project is in a particular locality, by default the project champion would be the locality. And then we have GRTC, Capital Region Airport Commissions, Ride Finders as well. So it's a little bit complicated for the passenger rail project because it crosses jurisdiction, and I don't know who would be the appropriate project champion for those projects. But I have a suggestion to include VDOT as well as DRPT. Both of them are state agencies and are not eligible to be applicant in smart scale process. But I think for our process in LRTP, we can have VDOT and DRPT. VDOT can be the project champion for interstate projects crossing multiple jurisdictions. Similarly, DRPT with transit and passenger rail projects. And then finally, the Port of Virginia project. Port of Virginia is not a member of RRTPO, so I don't know how would we either the project champion would it be City of Richmond, or we all agree that we also include Port of Virginia as one of the project champion. So this is under discussion, and we probably need some feedback from the group to move forward.
This is Louise. Just have a question about, so who would be a champion for bike ped projects that cross jurisdictions?
It would be RRTPO.
Okay, does that need a separate thing like you have for highway project and transit project?
Yeah, we can add that.
Okay.
Or we can make a common category, not separating highway or transit or bike ped, just stating it as RRTPO project.
Sure.
Okay, let's move forward. The important question now is that we have this universe of projects, and we need to decide, we need to define which projects are regional and have the magnitude to be included in the LRTP, and which other projects can be considered as local and programmatic. So for the TIP, the project to be included in the TIP and regional funding eligibility, like the RRTP CMAC or smart scale applications, either the project is regional, we define that project being regional or local. And if it's a regional project, if it's in the long range transportation plan, it would be eligible for funding. If the project is not in the long range transportation plan, it will not be eligible. So we need to amend LRTP to include that project into the constraint list of project. So for example, if there is a local project which is not in LRTP and which got funding from smart scale, or which is being asked for smart scale funding and which needs a regional application, this process needs to be followed. If it's not in the long range transportation plan, we need to amend that. If it's already in the long range transportation plan, then that we are fine. So the important question is to define regional and get the differentiate the regional projects as well as local and programmatic projects. And then staff has some project inclusion guidelines based on research we have done. So all regional projects must be included in the LRTP. So basically this definition of regional projects have been drawn from 23 Code of Federal Regulations section 450.104, regionally significant for air quality conformity. So it's the federal definition is not clear, and it's up to us to interpret that. So based on that guidelines, we have come up with these projects which we think are regional in nature. So for roadway projects, all roads included in the Richmond Tri-Cities model transportation network would be considered. So if there is a capacity change, add, remove lane, changing use of lane, example, hot lane or HOV lane, bus lane only, realignment or relocation of roadway projects, new interchanges, overpass and underpasses, all these projects would be eligible for LRTP. For the bridge projects, which would be based on the state of good repair funding and or major rehabilitation of bridges, which is in the National Bridge Inventory, and there is a screening for the size of the bridge, which is included in National Bridge Inventory, and then that bridge also needs to be in the National Highway System, which was defined after the 2010 census. The transit projects, new dedicated transit right-of-way, all those projects, all new proposed transit routes, new or relocate transit centers, stations, park and ride lots with 200 spaces or more, and we came up with that number because that's the average park and lot spaces in the Richmond region. So that's the number. And then park and ride lot expansion to existing lots that require 200 or more spaces, taking the same principle of the average parking lot size in the Richmond region. For bike ped projects, projects on segregated lanes with dedicated right-of-way, and then also projects of independent utilities that are part of larger multi-jurisdictional network or significantly contribute to the filling in identified gaps in existing bike ped network. For intermodal projects, capacity change in intermodal corridors, and we define Richmond region intermodal corridors as inclusive of highways, navigable waterways, rail lines linked to the regional hubs, including Richmond Marine Terminals, Richmond International Airport, regional airports, major railway yards and station, and distribution and warehousing facilities throughout the region. So it's just not the capacity change in highways, but all these different modes as well. And then finally, the SIP projects, all project lists in the latest SIP become projects for time band 1 in the LRTP. That's by default. These projects, we don't need to rank and prioritize these projects. And all projects, whether they are regional or not in nature, would be included in time band 1. Similarly, what we are recommending for programmatic and local projects, which need not to be in the LRTP, are 1, roadway projects drawn from the list of exempt projects, rehabilitation and maintenance, safety projects, operations projects, intersection improvements, other projects not specifically listed in regional project list. Bridge projects, any bridge which is not in the National Bridge Inventory, which is in the National Bridge Inventory and which is outside the NHS. So that would be in the local project list. Transit project, new bus purchase, bus shelters, stop improvements, transit maintenance and operations facilities, park and ride lots under 200 spaces, and TDM programs. Those won't be in the LRTP. Those would be just the local projects. And then bike ped projects, bike and ped projects within or adjacent of the existing right of way. So if there is a road diet, or if there is a the width of the shoulders particular highways section is increased, those won't count in LRTP. Those would be local projects. And then finally, intermodal projects, all other intermodal projects which were not listed previously, like the purchase and maintenance projects, the ITS projects, planning studies, including professional engineering only projects, and then a blanket statement that all other projects not listed in the regional projects list. So the next step would be the vetting for this inclusion guidelines by the LRTP Advisory Committee. Once this has been vetted and approved by the LRTP committee, we'll screen issues, needs, inventory for LRTP specific needs based on the guidelines. And then once we screen those projects, we will develop, screen those issues, we'll develop projects for the screen needs or issues. So what we are requesting for action is the advisory committee to approve the project inclusion guidelines. And I have just thrown this at this meeting. If we need more time to discuss the inclusion guidelines, we can do that. If anybody has any concerns and need time to think over it, we can do that. But this is all I have. If you have any questions, I can answer them now.
This is Louise. Do they need to be approved at this meeting, or can they be approved at the June 25 meeting?
They can be approved in the next meeting as well. But we want to start the conversation going, start the discussion as soon as possible.
I just asked because it takes me some time to process, but if we need to.
Yeah, definitely. Staff is in agreement to that. It's a lot of information to process today. So if the LRTP Advisory Committee wants to look at this from now to the next meeting, and would come in the next meeting with comments or approve as it's suggested by the RRTPO staff, we are open to that.
I guess personally, I also would like a little bit more time to digest and review. And if we can send this information out, again to the committee, and we'd have a full month review, I think that would be beneficial for everyone. Get a little bit more comfort and have a little bit more time to digest, because we have covered a lot of information in today's meeting.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
All right, are there any other comments or concerns right now on this particular issue? So I guess to summarize, we'll, as a committee, have some time to look over the information, and we'll be ready to discuss and approve that particular component of the project at the next meeting. So we'll move on ahead to item number 7, the Community Outreach Meetings Report.
Thanks. I don't have a whole lot to report because we've been doing a lot of things from our desks, but I did want to share, hopefully you all are familiar with this, with the project website. This is our public engagement tab, and this was where we had the needs inventory and the needs assessment available for public review and comment. You can see that we did have lots of feedback, especially on the needs inventory, and I think that hopefully many of you were able to share this information with your respective organizations and groups, so that we could get as much feedback as possible. To I believe Louise's point earlier about the goals and vision, we're looking at a couple different tools that we can use that we're waiting for some feedback from VDOT and other partners to be able to fully utilize. But we're doing some fairly sizable research right now on what are the options that we can use to kind of boil down a lot of technical information into something that you can pull up on your screen and at least get an idea of what's going on. Louise had commented in the chat about Richmond 300, and we're certainly aware of their capabilities and the work that they've been doing, and our staff is involved with them to make sure that transportation needs are identified. We're trying to translate right now our capabilities and our ability for a limited staff to manage a process like this in a new way. So we want it to happen, and I think that we hear you loud and clear about the need to get this out into the community in a different way, and that's been my goal since we started the whole thing. So we're certainly still making that effort and want to do the best we can. So we'll certainly talk to city folks and see what their lessons learned are, and see what we can do in cooperation with VDOT and DRPT to utilize their platforms as well. I think the next step, as we've discussed earlier today, is to have a more comprehensive discussion about vision and goals, and that's kind of the next translation for our public outreach phase, and that hopefully that feedback can be brought back to this committee for further discussion and refinement, and then we can get to a point where everyone's comfortable with adopting something. So I think Andrew, that's essentially the gist of what's happening next in terms of public outreach. So I'd be happy to entertain any discussion now, or we can talk about that at the next meeting once we have some recommendations for you all.
Any initial comments or feedback for staff? All right, before we adjourn, I think there were a couple of different future meeting topics that we have discussed throughout the course of the meeting. So I think it sounds like at the next meeting, committee members should be prepared to discuss the project inclusion guideline. Is that correct, Sulab?
Yeah, we need a discussion on some of the parking lot items which we need to finalize, including the project champions, as well as the project inclusion guidelines, and as well discuss on the goals and visions and objectives.
All right, so we'll be thinking about that, and the packet will include that information about project champions, project inclusion guidelines, and then the vision and goals exercise. And I think, Chet, one member had expressed interest in learning more about the model and having an overview for committee members in the future. Is that something that could be accommodated?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's worthwhile because a travel demand model is something that's a little unlike anything else, and we could certainly put together a presentation that kind of goes through it for the layperson to explain what it does, what the inputs are, what the outputs are, how it can be used, those kinds of things. Absolutely.
All right. Well, before we adjourn, are there any final comments from committee members or staff?
I think something to remind everyone.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you to Sulab for presenting a whole lot of information and knowing exactly how much you had to navigate through during the pandemic. I'll be interested to kind of see moving forward how we handle the goals, because I know 9 was a lot when we did it last time, in terms of trying to do a filter and a lens for the rest of the planning process. But I just wanted to throw out there saying thank you to Sulab and the staff for everything they've done so far.
And then, Chet, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just quickly. I appreciate that, Tiffany. I do want to say that we are recording this, so all of the discussion and comments will be available on the website if you wanted to share that with your respective groups. We do want to be as transparent as possible and let people know that we're discussing these things, so appreciate any help that we can get.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. It looks like our next meeting will be June 25th at 9 a.m. All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.